Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast.
Boom!
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listeners of the show. We are so grateful for every single person who supports us on Patreon. If you would like to become a Patreon supporter, you can head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanderers. And for just a small amount of money each month, you can get added bonuses like postcards from all around the world, one-on-one hangouts with Ryan and myself, and copies of all of our ebooks and much more. So if you're interested in supporting the podcast, www.patreon.com/The World Wanderers. All right, Ryan, what are we talking about today?
Well, it's that end of the year time where things happen. So we're talking about end of the year things.
Well, kind of. We're talking about holiday things.
Yeah.
Same, but different.
I'm not talking about Labor Day.
Yeah. So this topic was something that we were chatting about with our production assistant, Shalini. And, Ryan and I are down in Mexico City for Christmas, or I guess we're going up to San Miguel for Christmas, but we're in Mexico for Christmas. She's traveling in Ecuador for Christmas. And we were talking about, different ways that we can make Christmas kind of the same as it is back home, but while on the road. And it kind of spurred this idea to talk about how Christmas has, sort of a lot of emotional attachment or connections behind it. It's a time where family and friends get together. It's a time where if you're away, you can feel a little bit homesick and kind of wish to go home, or maybe you even do go home. And so we kind of want to dive into, I guess, first of all, the topic of, the benefits of being away from home for Christmas. And then secondly, how you can kind of bring some of your traditions from home into Christmas anywhere in the world.
Yeah. So Christmas is a time that a lot of people who are going on bigger trips,
or maybe we should say holidays, not to exclude other people who don't celebrate Christmas. Holidays. The holidays.
Sure. So Christmas is a time Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa are a time when a lot of people postpone their big trips to go back home to, do their family thing and enjoy and embrace the holidays and all that good stuff.
Well, so we're examples of that. Our very first backpacking trip, we came home December 21st, I think it was. So right a couple days before Christmas. And our second big backpacking trip, we left like January 4th or 5th or something like that, like just a little bit after Christmas. So we've definitely done that before when we were a little bit younger, before we'd ever been away from home for Christmas.
Yeah, totally. But it's a time when a lot of people, especially, younger people, reach this point where you're like, okay, I'm traveling, I'm having an awesome time, it's going well. Maybe you're feeling like, I kind of would like to be continuing to travel, but you feel guilty about going home. Kind of puts people in a lot of, spots where you're like, maybe you decide to stay out for Christmas and keep traveling and you feel guilty. Maybe you go home and you feel like, I really should have kept traveling. If you undergo a large expense to do it. So, that's, I think, a good place to start is, do you want to kind of talk about the evolution of how we managed travel and Christmas?
Yeah, definitely. So like I kind of mentioned before, the first couple times we traveled, we did exactly what you were just talking about. We came home for Christmas, or we scheduled our trip around leaving after Christmas because it was really important to us to be around our families. And I think that, as a young person, I think that it's really normal. Like Christmas is just something that you grow up doing. There's a lot of, family traditions. It's a time where it can be really fun and you get gifts and there's all these different types of celebrations and, fun food festivities and all these things that are kind of attached to it. And so for me, I was I don't know if I ever really imagined myself not being home for Christmas, because it was this time that my grandparents came and, we'd go from one grandparent's house to another and we had all these really fun traditions that we did. And so I always wanted to coordinate my travels around that. And then when we got back from South America, we were actually at home in Canada the first time we didn't go home for Christmas. And we just decided we've never spent Christmas together and we're kind of like each other's family now. So why don't we just do this ourselves and make our own traditions? And then it just kind of escalated to, you know, we moved away the next year, and it didn't really make sense to come home at Christmas time when we were living in Atlanta. So instead we went to Austin, and then we were in Asia last year, and now we're in Mexico this year. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people put this pressure on themselves or have this pressure from their families to come home at Christmas. And it's actually the most expensive time to travel. Like, it's really not an ideal time to book a trip. Like, if you're planning to book within kind of like mid to end of December and then through like the first week of the new year, it's exponentially more expensive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even on a small scale, we experienced this, looking for flights around the time of American Thanksgiving. Everything was really expensive. We were thinking about going to visit a friend. We were like, oh, why don't we just do it a different weekend? Super cheap.
$200 less. And it's even the same thing. I mean, because we're in Mexico City for longer than 6 months, which is what our tourist visa is, we actually have to leave the country and re-enter at some point. And so it's like, you know, Christmas is the perfect time. You know, we can take a little bit more time off work at that point and that sort of thing. And I looked at the difference between flights to, I mean, I'll just use Costa Rica as an example. It was 2 to 3 times as more expensive to go around Christmas than it was to go in a different month. So obviously we're not doing that. But I think, you know, getting back to the topic, do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, what that first Christmas was like when we didn't go home?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of like feelings mixed up in there. You know, I think especially around Christmas, that's like the holiday. You know, if you're growing up in North America, that time of year is like, you know, holiday time. That's like, you know, most other holidays have kind of had like significance reduced. You know, they're more just like, hey, you know, long weekend, this is cool. But that's like the, you know, the big one. And there's so much, even if, you know, neither of us are, religious, but, you know, there's still so many traditions that are built around there family wise. So yeah, I think definitely had like some guilt, and feelings there. It felt like a bit weird, you know, while everyone else was doing things with their family. I think we, you know, slapped together a turkey and watched a movie.
Christmas movie, maybe. We also made a homemade, gluten-free,
apple pie?
No refined sugar apple pie with dairy-free ice cream.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the life. I don't feel like crap.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely, you know, sadness and guilt for sure around it, but I think it was also like really nice in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a theory that most young people should at least one time while they are still, you know, at a fairly young age, not go home for Christmas. What
are you defining as young? Like in your 20s?
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't done it and you're in your 30s, you know, do it now. But if you're in your 20s, even better. If you're 13, maybe not yet. Maybe chill. But I think there can be...
I don't think we have 13-year-olds listening to the podcast.
Shout out all the teen listeners. Yeah. So this theory, let me extrapolate. So I think there's a lot of value and a lot of benefit to be gained from, you know, from family and from some of the rituals around that. Maybe a few years ago, I was like, well, Christmas, that doesn't make any sense. This is like a pagan holiday. That was kind of like co-opted by the Catholic Church when they were moving into, you know, Northern Europe. I'm not even Christian. You know, why am I celebrating Christmas? This makes no sense. And, you know, maybe I've come around a bit to see the value of the ritual. What's funny?
This is the Inside Ryan's Brain episode.
Anyways, I've come around a bit to see the ritual, but I think you can only really see the value and experience that sense of, you know, that sense of voluntary choice if you abstain from it. So, you know, staying by yourself at, you know, and sitting around and making yourself a turkey or watching a movie for Christmas really makes you appreciate the value that exists there in Christmas, as opposed to going through this process of every year out of a sense of guilt and obligation, just going back to your family home or, you know, your partner's family home and kind of going through the motions and hanging out and talking to cousins you don't really care about, or other people, and, you know, drinking and eating and doing all this stuff and coming away feeling like, that wasn't really enjoyable. I think that there's a lot to be gained out of exercising your personal power. And I think as well, a lot of people live a life where they, don't exercise their personal freedom in their family relationships. And this results in a lot of things where, people do things they don't want to do because they feel a sense of guilt. And, if you don't go home for Christmas, that's like, that's just like the whole house of cards comes down, essentially. Then people, the expectations are changed. It's not the same as, oh, I didn't go home for Labor Day weekend. There might be disappointment, but it's not going to be like, okay, you didn't go home for Christmas.
Well, I mean, depending on like familiar traditions, maybe people are really into Labor Day, but maybe. Yeah, in general.
Yeah. So those are kind of the 2 points. One, it kind of like, it allows you to appreciate the value that you get there. And then maybe you say, hey, that was really fun. I want to do that more. I'm going to like make time to see my family at other points in time when it's more easy and accessible. Or maybe you say like, hey, that really sucked. I miss my family. I really enjoy it. I'm going to go do that. But in a lot of ways, you can't really appreciate something until you abstain from it. Like this is, one of the beautiful things about travel. It really makes you appreciate home. And so that's kind of where my theory comes from.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point there where, it's not about like, oh, I've realized that my family traditions actually don't serve me and I'm never going to go home for Christmas again. I mean, maybe it is about that for you, but I think it's also
not for me.
Not for you, like in general, the general you out there.
Okay.
But it might also be really recognizing how important Christmas is for you and, planning every other trip after that so that you can be home or being that time of year when you do go home. I think for us, missing Christmas was actually, it's actually a lot more relaxing for us to just do Christmas, the two of us. So it's just become, kind of our thing now is we would prefer to go home when it's warm out in the summertime. I feel like I can have just as much quality time with my family and friends. I mean, I don't even get to see my friends at Christmas. So at least I get to see my friends when I go home in the summer. And I found that, I'm able to get the little pieces of Christmas that mean the most to me while I'm in another country, which is kind of part 2 of this. Do you feel like we kind of wrapped up that section?
Yeah.
Okay. So in summation, you should miss a Christmas. All right. So part 2.
That's not going to be a controversial opinion.
So part 2 of this episode.
In come the negative iTunes reviews.
Damn it. Explicit rating.
They hate Christmas.
These 2 are so negative. They hate Christmas so much. I actually really love Christmas.
Shout out Santa Claus.
Santa's my BFF. So anyways, I think that, despite the fact that we make a conscious choice not to go home for Christmas at this point, it doesn't mean that, when my mom posts a photo of the Christmas tree and the presents on it, under it, and, baking shortbread cookies and, them watching the Grinch and stuff, it's not that I don't feel anything. Like I definitely feel homesick around that. It's one of the times of year that I actually feel the most homesick. And it's kind of interesting because so we're from Canada. It's really cold up in Canada. So Christmas is traditionally snowy. And we have spent the last couple of years in places that are not snowy. So our first Christmas away was spent, or I guess our first Christmas away was spent actually in Canada. But so the one outside of Canada was spent in the southern US. And then we were in Thailand last year and now we'll be in Mexico. So not cold places, really warm places. So there's something about the Christmas spirit to me that is really attached to cold weather. It's like the seasons change, the styles change. I get out like my toque and my scarf and my mitts and I get to bundle up and I get to like drink hot cocoa because it's cold out and eat a bunch of cookies and it feels okay because, it's cold and it's dark and we're going to turn on our Christmas lights and play Christmas music. And I feel like I don't get that as much when I'm in warm places. Like Mexico has decorations up, like there's Christmas trees, but it feels weird because it's like 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. It's just like, is it really Christmas? And, like how many days? 18, 19 days, whatever it is. So it feels weird, but, there are a couple things that we do to kind of get in the holiday spirit. Do you want to talk about some of the things that you do to kind of bring Christmas wherever we are in the world?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm kind of coming around to like enjoying Christmas.
Grinch.
Yeah, Scrooge McDuck and me just hang out. So, yeah, I like listening to Christmas music leading up to it. One of the beautiful things, and it's probably my favorite thing about Christmas recently, is that now that Star Wars has been revamped, Star Wars movies are coming out. So last year we went and watched Rogue One on Christmas Day.
The year before we watched, not on Christmas Day, but
it was Christmas.
It was like right
Boxing
after.
Day.
Yeah.
So this year, probably a day or two before, or maybe a day or two after Christmas, go and check out The Last Jedi. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I like to put on Christmas music.
So let's dive into that one. So, I mean, Spotify, you can use anywhere in the world. So if you have a Spotify account or maybe a Apple Music account, you can really get your favorite Christmas tunes really easily right into your ears. And it kind of is a way to like get yourself feeling Christmassy regardless, or, you know, in the holiday spirit, regardless of where you are in the world or who you're with. Yeah,
absolutely. And if you don't have Spotify, it's probably one of the best decisions I've made this year is just getting Spotify Premium.
This episode is not brought to you by Spotify.
Life is just so much better with Spotify Premium. Okay. But yeah, getting Spotify, there's all sorts of different types. I can get my Latin Christmas music. They don't have that reggaeton Christmas music playlist yet. Maybe next year. But you can find some great Christmas music.
It's not even mid-December yet. It's not too late.
For the reggaeton Christmas?
Yeah.
J Balvin.
You could make that playlist.
Yeah. So yeah, Christmas music. I like hopping on Spotify, getting some of that going.
Christmas movies.
Christmas movies.
No, we usually watch like at least a Christmas movie a year. Maybe it's because I make you do it, but we used to watch The Grinch when I was growing up, and I like The Grinch. Like I haven't outgrown it per se, but I just don't really watch it anymore. I really like watching Elf usually. It's kind of my Christmas movie of choice. Love Actually is another great one. But again, Netflix. I mean, you can access Netflix anywhere in the world. And, you know, this time of year, all the Christmas movies are put up there. I think a lot of them stay around all year, but there's definitely holiday specials that happen on Netflix, which is really amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And then, one of the cool things we did last year was when we were in Thailand for Christmas. There was a local restaurant there that catered to a lot of expats. And obviously Thailand is a Buddhist country, so not much going on there for Christmas. But we were able to find this cool event on Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. Went out, big turkey dinner, met some great friends, one of which we were actually just hanging out with this past weekend here in Mexico. So no matter where you are, unless, you know, you're in the jungle, there are likely going to be some form of Christmas events going on.
Yeah, holiday events.
Yeah, so, you know, finding that, like if you know, for example, here in Mexico City, you know, predominantly Christian and Catholic country, there'll be lots of interesting things happening for Christmas. So like getting out and experiencing some of those. When we were in Atlanta, we were able to go watch a live play of Elf. And then had some friends over and made dinner. And then Thailand, we were able to go out and do that, you know, that kind of dinner at a restaurant. And that's the type of thing that's really, I think quite fun and interesting, especially if you're in a place where it's not as celebrated, you know, if you're in Thailand or maybe, you know,
places in Indonesia that aren't Bali.
Yeah. Southeast Asia, finding maybe there's a restaurant that caters that caters to expats, and maybe they've got like a cool Christmas event, and being able to go out and meet people and turn it into a social thing is a great way to approach it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And, you know, being in Atlanta, that was the first time that we kind of did like a friend's Christmas, Friendsmas. You know, people say like Friendsgiving. And Christmas had always, for me, been very strictly family. Like, I think even when I was, you know, before you and I started dating, when I was dating other people, it was never really like okay for me to bring like boyfriends over to go to their houses for Christmas. Like it was very much like we do our family thing and we have our family traditions and we don't stray from this like path of what we do. And I kind of was like, oh, you know, it's going to be like less meaningful to do this like dinner with friends. And we hosted 3 friends, I guess all of which have actually been on the podcast. Shout out James, Julia, and Steve. Julia and Steve did an episode with us about, you know, their travels last year. And then our friend James was part of our why we love Atlanta episode. So if you want to know who these people that we had Christmas dinner were, you can go check that out. Anyways, it was actually so fun. We didn't even really know James and Julia, or Julia and Steve at that point.
We didn't know any of these people. I don't know where they came from.
We just had randoms at our house. No, but we weren't like close with them at all at that point. And I guess in my head, I just kind of was like, oh, you know, I've kind of like devalued Christmas, or, you know, it's not going to be as meaningful. It's not going to feel the same as when I do things with my family. And it certainly wasn't the same as, you know, doing stuff with my family, but it really gave me that sense of connection and bonding and friendship and enjoying a really great meal and being grateful for it. And I think that below everything else, that's kind of what the holidays are about. And that's kind of what has kind of changed my opinion. It's not as much about, oh, I got you this great big present and we have a big tree. It's more like, oh, you know, we've enjoyed a really great meal together and we've been able to share a great conversation and play a board game and that sort of thing. So if you are away, definitely looking for those events. And then also, you know, hostels will have those types of things. Hostels are for backpackers, they're for travelers, and they always do things to kind of make people feel like they're at home.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. If you're someone who's out traveling, maybe you'd like to stay at Airbnbs. Like for us, for example, you know, if we were in a foreign country, it's a weird thing to say. You know, if we're traveling.
Are we in a foreign country?
Well, yo soy mexicano. Pero.
Don't put cultural appropriation on our podcast.
Cultural appropriation. The next iTunes review. Sí. Pero, if you're traveling and maybe you stay in Airbnbs for the most part, Christmas can definitely feel slightly lonely, especially if you're in a country that celebrates Christmas and everything's shut down. Like if you're in Europe, for example, staying in a hostel, even if you maybe don't like sleeping in dorm rooms with a bunch of other people, or, you know, maybe you find it like annoying, but going for those like the day or two so that you can be social and, you know, hang out with other people who are in the same circumstance. It can be really, I think, a great time because like everything just slows down and you can, you know, hang out with people and get to know other people and kind of go through and bond in an experience like that. So, yeah, definitely like maybe staying in a hostel when you might not otherwise because it's a good context to be around other people is a great idea.
For sure. So I have 2 more things that I want to bring up. And the next one is if you are in a situation like we are or we were in Atlanta where you're kind of like more living somewhere, you can get little Christmas decorations or little holiday decorations for really, really cheap. And you can find some really cute stuff out there. So, you know, we were looking into getting like a little mini tree to kind of make our apartment a bit more festive. You can get, you know, a set of twinkle lights or something like that. And I think that just having that around kind of gives it the feeling.
Yeah, if you've got like a 50-liter backpack, your little baby Christmas tree, some lights. Yeah.
I mean, you can do that too. I don't discriminate. It's actually kind of like a cute idea. You could get like a little not a glass one, but a little decoration and attach it to your backpack or something like that. But I think just thinking of ways that are kind of outside the box to be more festive. Like if you have a kitchen where you're staying, maybe baking your favorite holiday recipe, making Christmas cookies, maybe inviting some people over to, you know, decorate cookies or make a gingerbread house. Taking the things that you do at home that you really miss and kind of bringing those to where you are. And then my last one, hopefully nobody hates on me for this, is Starbucks. Starbucks holiday drinks are so awesome. And I know last year was actually probably the hardest Christmas we spent away because it was so hot in Thailand. Like you mentioned before, it's a Buddhist country, so there wasn't decorations. Like, obviously, I'm not against that, just to be clear.
It's so strange of them.
It's so weird that they don't decorate for
I don't know
Christmas.
what they're decorating for.
But it just, as somebody who celebrated Christmas, it can be very strange to be like, oh, Christmas is coming up, but like nothing about this place feels Christmassy, and it's not going to. So then you have to kind of get really creative. And I felt like, we went and saw Star Wars. We went and got like a holiday beverage on Christmas Day. And even though it was like 35 degrees Celsius and there was no twinkle lights, there was no tinsel, and there was no Christmas trees anywhere, I still felt like we were able to get a little bit of holiday festivities.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot that we did that.
And like a peppermint mocha candy cane latte.
Treat yourself. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, I think one of the big things about Christmas is the food. And, growing up, we always used to make like, rum balls, but we make them with amaretto and, meringue. And then, so going out and getting like a Christmas drink from Starbucks was, a fun treat. I couldn't find Terry's chocolate orange anywhere. I still haven't been able to here in Mexico either. I think one of the great things that you can have, by traveling over the point in time of Christmas is this opportunity to kind of like experience this cultural event from an outsider's perspective. I think a lot of people go through life without really kind of like deeply questioning the things that are going on. And I think Christmas is a big one of those. There's a lot of obligations to family that come up, and a lot of people don't ever take time to question that. And there's just a lot of like ritual and celebrations and things that are happening. And if you just pause and are like, wait a second, like what's with this tree? Like, I don't get why we're bringing a tree inside our house. Like, what's with the lights? Why are we cooking food? Why is everybody getting fat? Like, I don't understand what's happening. Why? And why do we do this, right? And if you ask enough whys about Christmas, the whole thing kind of unravels. But it's this opportunity to be outside the country and to really see this and be like, this is kind of weird, all of this stuff that happens around this time. And like, oh, I'm feeling weird about it. Like, I feel weird about not going home. Why is this happening? So it's a great moment for introspection and being able to kind of see this gigantic cultural event from an outsider's perspective. I think it gives you a lot of insight into, yourself and your past experience. Just having that thing about like, oh, weird, I've never really thought about how I experienced Christmas this way, of this like, cold weather, sitting by the fire, going skiing type way. But, that's definitely like a minority thing. In terms of the greater population of people who are celebrating Christmas, most of them are doing it in countries where there are no snow. So a really cool opportunity if you view it through a positive lens to kind of gain insight on the culture and to come back that next time you do experience. And it's like, I'm sure the next time we're in Canada for Christmas, it'll have like this whole new dimension, like putting on like an old comfy sweater. Mm-hmm. But we would never be able to have that experience if we didn't take, 3-4 years away doing it on our own in other places.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that, obviously everyone has a different background and a different belief system and different traditions and whatnot. So, look at, take the information that we're giving you and look at, what's resonating with you, what's not, and make your decision from there. But if you are...
The only important things are to buy Starbucks beverages and sign up for Spotify Premium. What's the other one?
I was just going to
Grocery shutting
that.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, Starbucks beverages, Spotify Premium, or
Netflix,
or Apple Music. Watch movies on Netflix.
No, not Apple Music. Spotify.
They're not sponsoring the podcast.
Apple Music is horrible. Spotify is the only one.
Anyways, so, those are just a couple of ideas of ways that you can kind of incorporate, the holiday season or Christmas and your traditions at home into wherever you are in the world. And it's always going to be different. it's never going to be the same as being at home. But I think you can get kind of these like little tidbits of things that are really meaningful for you. And it really gives you the opportunity to make the choices about what's important for you. Like maybe your mom has been forcing you to drink eggnog for like 23 years of your life. And then you leave and you're like, I don't even like eggnog.
I'm lactose intolerant.
Yeah. Or you're like me and you're like, oh, I really just want to binge a bunch of eggnog. I just want to binge drink it. So you really have this opportunity to kind of find your own space in the holiday season.
Yeah. And I think as well, if you are somewhere else and you want to keep traveling, but you feel this like sense of obligation, I think it's good to question that. And it's a really good reason to not go home for Christmas. Like, the first time we didn't, we were both very close to where our families were, and that makes it much harder. If you're in Asia, it's easy to say, oh, hey, I can't come home. I'm traveling.
If you're from North America, just go to Australia. If you're from Australia, just go to North America. Yeah. Then you don't have to go.
Yeah.
Is that I think you should, what you said?
I think you should take responsibility. But, that said, it does make it, it's a good reason to kind of experiment with doing that. And, I think it's a really good, I think a lot of people would view it through just the negative lens. Like, okay, I can't go home for Christmas. This is a bummer. I'm depressed. I'm sad. This is terrible. But there's a lot of value that can come out of that experience.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that we've pretty much wrapped up this episode of the podcast.
Put it under the tree.
Wrapped it up, tied a bow, and put it under our baby tree, which we don't have yet, but we're going to get. So
if enough people support us on Patreon.
Yeah, this one's goal goes towards our baby tree in our Mexico City apartment. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, other ideas for how you bring Christmas to wherever you are in the world, send us an email at info@theworldwanders.com or find us on Facebook at The World Wanders Podcast and tell us about your Christmas plans. You can also
or holidays in general. I'd be curious to hear what it's like if you're, if you celebrate Hanukkah and you're traveling during that period of time, what that experience is like.
Yeah, definitely. And our 2017 holiday gift guide is available. So if you want to purchase a gift for maybe yourself or a fellow traveler in your life and you're looking for some ideas, you can find that up on the blog at theworldwanders.com. As always, thanks so much for listening and happy holidays.
Feliz Navidad. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanders.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanders.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanders or on Twitter at WorldWanders1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.